Good afternoon and welcome back, everyone. It's a great honor and pleasure to introduce the second invited speaker of ACNS this year. And it's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Haya Shulman. Haya, also PhD from the University of Milan with Amir Herzberg. And then she moved on to the University of Darmstadt, where she's now working in Darmstadt in the Fraunhofer City Institute. She's director of cybersecurity and analytics. And Haya has published in some of the best conferences in the field on a regular basis, and her work has received several prizes, the Finner Prize, some awards from Checkpoint, but also an award from the IETF RRTF on applied networking research. And so Haya has been working on security of routing, and so this afternoon she will speak on RPKI's deployment and security of BGP. Please join me in welcoming Haya.
Thank you very much, Bart, for this generous introduction. Hello to everyone. So this talk today is about a very practical system. It's about routing security and a protocol which is meant to ensure security of routing, the RPKI. Now, I will try to show you lessons which are general for any other system in the internet. So when we talk about routing, I'll show you generalization, what it means for other systems, and what it means to deploy cryptography in the internet. Why it is such a big challenge, and what is the situation nowadays. So first, the internet is insecure. There's no news to you. Internet was designed in the 80s, and security was not the main driving force behind all these infrastructure protocols. Due to frequent attacks in the couple of recent decades, the awareness to the importance of deploying security is rising, and with this awareness also the effort to deploy cryptographic defenses. And there is a lot of long history of crypto defenses. We have many beautiful crypto schemes with more than 40 years of crypto. So how much of it is actually deployed in the internet? And why can't we just use all these beautiful results to secure the internet infrastructure? Unfortunately, currently, the security for most internet systems is not even in the horizon. And the natural question is why? So what we will see today is that it doesn't apply to one specific system. This problem is very general. We have different internet protocols, and I will focus on anything that has to do with communication today. We have different internet protocols that has, for instance, let's look at the naming system, which is meant to allow to map and locate resources in the internet, the DNS. The network time protocol, a system which is meant to allow to synchronize systems in the internet. If you don't have synchronization, crypto doesn't work, right? If you cannot synchronize your time, you cannot have security updates. So also a very basic and important system. You have the BGP, the Border Gateway Protocol. The system is the Google Maps of the internet, allows us to find the right path to the destination. So all the systems are extremely critical and important and very basic. But they are all exposed to attacks. And actually, this is just a few examples. There are many more problems with crypto in the internet. So if you think of even very basic things like generating randomness in crypto, this was solved ages ago. In practice, this is an open problem still. We still cannot generate randomness securely, right? You cannot use the same system for generating randomness as you use on a PC, standard PC, on the cloud, because the entropy sources are different, or on routers, or on smart cards. So we have when developing and writing crypto papers, we make different assumptions than the constraints that we have in the real world. And that's what we will look at. What generalizes all these different systems in the internet, and why does it make it difficult to deploy cryptography in the internet? So, I generalized a few most significant ones. So first of all, there is low motivation to deploy crypto. In any system that we will take, NTP that I mentioned, DNS, routing, other systems, very low motivation to deploy crypto. Why? Well, actually, very, very basic problems. You have the significant changes that are required to deploy the system. You have to replace the hardware, the software, you have to train personnel, you have to invest in it, and you have to maintain it. It's much more difficult than just running an insecure system because it requires much less attention and effort. Costs, a lot of costs, high costs, benefits for early adopters. So even if an organization wants to deploy crypto, the benefit that it immediately gets is actually not so high, if at all. But on the other hand, it is often exposed to new attacks. And this applies to all the systems that we just mentioned. So these problems are shared to all these different systems. And I took just 3 of them as representative. So because of this low motivation, almost no crypto is used. In NTP, DNS routing, we will see that almost no crypto is used. And I'm not talking about zero knowledge, secure computation, which is modern crypto, or relatively complex. I'm talking about even signatures, or generating random numbers for every for instance, time you want to sign something, or generate keys. Basic things are done incorrectly or are not done at all. So low motivation to do crypto, and there is very little crypto. On the other hand, even those that did crypto are not necessarily secure. There are operational challenges which were not foreseen. There are organizational challenges and limitations. And there is human error. There are more factors, but they're more secondary. These are the prime factors, I would say, that apply to all the systems. And what does this mean? This means this insecure adoption or erroneous adoptions. They're often misconfigured, often or insecure. And what this means is that when we design a system and we think about how we deploy it in the internet, we have a certain vision of the internet or how the internet works. But actually, internet works otherwise. It looks otherwise than what we think it looks. If you look in this textbook and you see DNS, the DNS in the internet is actually completely different from the one that you were taught at the university. Even as network operators, people think they saw and did everything. They are still surprised because there are so many different ways to interpret things. RFCs, those are standards which specify how internet protocols should be deployed or systems. They're open for interpretations, and there is much more than we can imagine. So actually, when you design a DNSSEC, for instance, a security protocol for DNS, and you think it's how it will be deployed in real life, or in practice, in real life you don't foresee many challenges and dependencies and other systems which may impact your security guarantees. As I mentioned, for instance, with randomness, developers develop these randomness libraries which can be used for generating randomness and for crypto, for instance, or for passwords and so on. But using those libraries in different environments may be insecure because you have different entry resources. So these are the main challenges and problems. And let's look at what are the implications of our insecure infrastructure. And more specifically, okay, so the infrastructure is insecure. Can we just focus on application layer? Because actually we don't really care about infrastructure. We want to send email, we want to do web, we want to do IoT, autonomous cars, we want to do new concepts and paradigms, cloud, edge cloud, why do we need to focus on internet infrastructure? If we secure the application, that should suffice, right? We can use SSL TLS for web and other protocols, and maybe this would do it. Actually it doesn't, because all the systems and security mechanisms, they rely on secure internet infrastructure. Think about, let's take the most basic and common internet protocol that we know, the web and SSL TLS. So when you issue certificates, certificate authorities, they need to be able to authenticate that you actually own the domain for which you want to issue a certificate. And how do they do it? There are a number of ways actually to do it. Organizational validation, extended validation, or domain validation. Now, organizational validation, extended validation they require that you visit the CA personally, that you send faxes, very cumbersome, very costly and cumbersome procedure. So actually, the CAs which use those procedures are not popular. The most popular CAs and widely used CAs that control 99% of the market are about 20 CAs which use domain validation. This is an automated procedure where you check that the domain is actually controlled really by the applicant. But if you can attack the DNS, then you can subvert the security of the web. You can subvert SSL and issue insecure fraudulent certificates. If you can attack the infrastructure, you can subvert the password authentication in the internet. You can hijack emails. So you cannot really ensure security of the applications without ensuring security of the infrastructure. And that's what our focus today is about. So let's look briefly at these two systems that I mentioned, DNS and NTP, and then we focus on BGP. Just to demonstrate to you the problems that I mentioned. So first, there is evidence of insecurity. No one argues that DNS is secure. There are multiple attacks, frequent attacks. Research shows that DNS is vulnerable. Real-life attacks, for instance, 2 weeks ago there was an attack against my Ether wallet where hackers did a BGP prefix hijacking to hijack a DNS request, to do DNS cache poisoning, to redirect clients to incorrect servers in order to steal their digital cache. So you see such complex attacks which utilize insecurity of the internet infrastructure. We also know that it's not just used by the attackers. This is also used by security agencies and government offices, and there are different programs which are used. Here's some example to monitor and do surveillance in the internet. So what are the defenses? There are defenses for DNS. It's authentication and encryption. There are different protocols that you can choose, but the most promising one that is being deployed is DNSSEC. But actually, it's not yet widely deployed. Actually, it's almost not deployed, and unfortunately, even those domains or resolvers which support those DNS servers which support DNSSEC, DNSSEC is just cryptographic signatures, even those that support DNSSEC, most of them are vulnerable because of vulnerable generation and management of crypto, and more specifically of crypto keys by DNS hosting providers and registrars. And not small ones, large ones like GoDaddy and Network Solutions and many others. And recently we showed last year, and there were a few follow-up works that I just mentioned at IMC and others, which showed that more than 35% of DNSSEC signed domains can be attacked because the keys can be broken. So they use, for instance, shared modeling, not even GCTs, and other problems. So DNS, there are solutions for DNS, there are defenses. Very little is deployed, and even those that are deployed, vulnerable. Bless you. NTP, Network Time Protocol. So many attacks that, I summarized just a few. It's used, of course, for denial of service attacks, but even the correctness and integrity of NTP can be subverted, and there is recent work and follow-up works which show the vulnerability of NTP. That you can reset time as an attacker, very weak attacker even, and cause networks to use different time. there were examples, or even benign failures, where time was resetted by 12 years and caused outages in different networks. So these outages have implications, because a lot of those outages, well, think about implications on critical infrastructure. What happens to electricity or water supply? So these outages, these misconfigurations and failures, they have not only implications in digital world. Nowadays, they have implications in our physical world. And the same applies to DNS and routing, not just NTP. Defenses, there are proposals not used. The same problem. Okay, so we saw a few problems in DNS and NTP, and what I will do today is I will focus on routing. I'll focus on routing, and I'll show you what is the defense in routing, what are the problems in routing, and how those problems that I briefly mentioned, how they come into play with BGP, and what we could do. So, border gateway protocol was designed in the 80s also, and it developed, and this was the original draft, by the way, where it was designed, almost like the margins of Fermat proof. It developed into a complex infrastructure and a complex system. What it does, it connects different networks in the internet, allowing them to communicate. It's the glue of the internet. It's such a significant system. Think what you could do if you redirect traffic to take a wrong route. Devastating results. Such attacks happen. So here's an attack that was run repeatedly for more than half a year between Mexico. Packets that were exchanged between Mexico and Washington DC were redirected to a different continent and then sent back. Monitored. The real communication is in green. The real communication was supposed to go like this. And actually in red is the attack communication, and it went like this. No one noticed this. No one noticed this attack, and it had been going on for months. Everything was tapped. Maybe injected, maybe malware was distributed. How common are such attacks? Actually, these attacks are extremely common, thousands per year. Only, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, and there were recent incidents since then, I just didn't update, but this was the incident from 2 weeks ago, where hackers stole digital cash. So, the attacks are common, but misconfigurations are also common. Actually, until recently, it was believed that most of the attacks are misconfigurations, although you could never have a proof for that. But now it's more and more evident that the misconfigurations are actually attacks, because you steal digital currency, so it's clear an attack. And there were also traces of DNS cache poisoning and of redirection of clients. So these attacks are extremely common and happen almost on a daily basis. What does it mean to do prefix hijacking? What is prefix hijacking and how does BGP work? I'll just briefly guide you through this so that you could understand the attacks and the defense. So BGP, connects different networks in the internet. And internet is just a collection of networks. And we have networks are called autonomous systems. An autonomous system can be a number of networks or one network. Autonomous systems, they communicate with each other. So let's say a customer at Deutsche Telekom network may be sending packets to a customer in network X. And how do these networks know to find each other? This is exactly BGP. So look at these two things. This arrow is a BGP advertisements, and this is data flow. So you have control and data plane here. AS3320 is Deutsche Telekom, is the autonomous system which is allocated to Deutsche Telekom. Each network in the internet or autonomous system has a number and has a prefix. Prefix is a block of addresses which is allocated to that network. So, to announce its reachability, Deutsche Telekom will say to all its neighbors, to reach any IP address within the block 91.0.0.0/10, you have to send to autonomous system 3320. So any computer with an IP address within that block, and how many computers are there? 2 to 22. We're talking about IPv4. Any computer within that address block will be here, and to send anything to this network, the ASY will have to send anything to this block, ASY has to send to AES 3320. Okay, so the way BGP works was when ASY sees this announcement of Deutsche Telekom, it will forward it. If it accepts it, it will accept. Update its routing tables, and will forward the announcement to ASX. You see this is announcement to ASX. Notice ASY also adds itself to the path. So you have a path where Deutsche Telekom and Y. If ASX wants to send packets to a computer at Deutsche Telekom, let's say a web server, it will have to send them first to the network of ASY, and ASY will then send them to ASX, just in rules and routing tables. Now, nothing prevents any network in the internet from announcing prefixes they do not own. So an attacker with autonomous system number 666, which is of course a malicious number. If you see a number 66 in the internet, you can know this is an attacker. They also advertise and they say, I own IP address block. IP address block and prefix, network prefix, I will use it interchangeably, it means the same, will say that it owns this 9100/10, and if you want to send packets to this IP address, send to 666. Now, ASX has to decide where does it send the packets. Will it send to Y, or will it send to 666? So, in fact, it will say send to 666 in this case because it will prefer the shorter route. Now, BGP works according to financial agreements and financially motivated. You have agreements, you have customers, and you pay for traffic that you relay. You are paid for traffic that you relay. But if, for instance, you have two peers or two customers, the same level, yeah, then you will look at other preferences and whether the route is short will be one of the preferences. It's not the main one as we will see, but it's one of the preferences. So it will send to an attacker. This is how an attacker will then hijack traffic from ASX that is meant to Deutsche Telekom. Let's look at another attack, sub-prefix hijacking. And sub-prefix hijacking works as follows. Here I used a little bit of a different topology. We have Deutsche Telekom here, and ASX, ASY, and the attacker is connected to ASY. ASY sends an announcement saying to ASY, AS666 sends an announcement to ASY saying to send for block 91/10 to send to it. Then AS3220 also announces this announcement and says, okay, for block 91/0/10 send to me, and AS6 sees, okay, for /16 I have to send to Y, and Y will send to 666. What will it decide? How will it route traffic? So here comes another decision which routers make, and this calls the most specific path, longest prefix match. Path length in this case doesn't matter. They will send to the most specific prefix. So everything that is destined for /16 within this prefix will be sent to ASY and then to 666. Otherwise, /10 will be sent to here. So traffic will split, and everything in this block 91/16 will always deterministically go here. Yeah, so longest prefix match, and that's the most easy way and stealthy way to hijack traffic. So we saw two ways. We saw how BGP works and two ways to hijack traffic. Now, let's look at defenses. These attacks are bad and they happen often, and because they happen often, because they're so devastating and so difficult to detect them, there are defenses. Resource public key infrastructure. Resource public key infrastructure in a nutshell is you have a provider, the regional internet registry, which creates certificates. You put certificates in this public database of one of your providers. If you are in Europe, then you use RIPE. In the United States, you use ARIN, and so on. There is one for Africa and South America. And you put certificates in those databases. And networks which want to deploy RPKI, they will use those certificates to create route origin authorizations signed with their private key of the network. Certificate will contain the public key. Certificate essentially binds the public key to a network prefix. And then this ROAs will be announced, and everyone which sees those ROAs will be able to know that the network is protected with RPKI. Now, so we have on the one hand, we have signatures and certificates, trivial thing to do. We know this from ages ago, we know how to do this. The other side of the coin is to validate actually those certificates. So we have certificates, use the keys, the public keys from those certificates to validate signatures. We use private key to create signatures over the announcements that are sent. Yeah, before that you saw that every network sends an announcement, so the announcements will be signed. And we need to do validations. So networks have to validate, otherwise there's no point to the certificates. That's essentially RPKI, it's trivial. Very simple mechanism. I mean, you are experts for proving crypto, and I guess this is not a complex crypto, you would agree with me. So here's an example of a network protected with RPKI. Deutsche Telekom uses RPKI. Deutsche Telekom got its allocation from RIPE. RIPE signed on the certificate of Deutsche Telekom. Deutsche Telekom then uses this certificate with the corresponding private key to create signed announcements and for its network. And this is the announcement. It will say Deutsche Telekom AS3320. This is the IP address block that belongs to Deutsche Telekom. And this is everyone that wants to validate it takes the certificate, and that's it. Very simple. Now, notice in the certificate there is also max length. This means what is the address block that the network is allowed to announce. In this case, you see Deutsche Telekom has /10 and they said max /10, so it's the same, it doesn't have to be the same, as we will see. This is one example. So how can RPKI prevent attacks? Let's look at the example that we just saw. When we have AS3320 created an ROA, route origin authorization, for its prefix with its autonomous system number, and it sends announcement to ASY. ASY, if it supports RPKI, it can validate that the announcement is correct, then it forwards the announcement to ASX. Now ASX receives this announcement and the announcement from the attacker. ASX validates also RPKI. It will see that there is a certificate or ROA in the public repository. We'll validate it, we'll know that this is incorrect and this is correct, we'll ignore this. Okay, and that's how, and we'll use the correct route. And then we'll send traffic using the correct route. This is how RPKI works, and this is how it makes routing secure. Now this trivial, simple, very simple mechanism, but provides security. It does what it has to do. Let's look at how much is it deployed. It is deployed, what are the problems and challenges, if there are any, and what are the implications in real life. So we start with, of course there are challenges, otherwise we will not be looking at this. We start with obstacles towards deployment, secure deployment of RPKI, and we look at operational and organizational challenges, and then human error. These are the most significant problems in all the different networking systems that you will see. Human error is an extremely significant problem. It's no joke. Even experts in organizations make mistakes. Not just because they didn't sleep enough, which also happens, but also because this requires expertise. You know, these people have to actually understand security, understand cryptography, understand how cryptography works, under what conditions it is secure, and so on. What operational challenges and organizational challenges there are, and how it influences deployments in real life. So, as an example of an organizational challenge, operational challenge, here's one example. Networks often set max lengths, what I showed to you in ROAs, route origin authorizations. They set it to be larger than the prefix. So the prefix is, for instance, 91.000/10, and they will set the max lengths to be /24 instead of /10. This is okay, the networks do that. Why would they do it? Different reasons. Traffic engineering, maybe you use Anycast, and your server is deployed all over the web and uses the same IP address, and you want to reroute traffic. Maybe you want to reroute traffic differently into your network mornings and to leave the traffic evenings for a different egress point. There are different reasons why network operators do that. This is one example for operational constraint which exists in practice. So they set max lengths to be more than prefix lengths. What are the implications of this? Actually, it has immediate implications on security. It results in insecure deployments. This simple operational practice, which was not thought of when BGP or RPKI was designed or planned, causes insecurity. So here's an example. You have autonomous system AX on end 666, and an autonomous system A has a prefix 1200/16. So it has 2 to 16 IP addresses in its network. And it created an ROA for its network prefix, and the ROA has max length set to 24. Namely, this network is allowed to make announcements, signed announcements for prefixes up until 24/24. Then the ASA sends the announcement to ASX, but AS666 then creates its own announcement and notice what it says. It says that AS666 is connected directly to A, has a direct path to A. You have no idea to know that because there are different connections between networks. Sometimes these connections change, they are dynamic. It's not like you can, in advance, this is not rigid. You cannot have a map of the internet and then say, okay, everything that doesn't go by this path, this is an attack. Because these agreements change dynamically. Suddenly you can have an agreement with a new ISP, you can suballocate an address block, and you will create new, use a different upstream provider and so on. So this is completely legitimate. Okay, in this case it's not legitimate, but in real life it can be legitimate that you will have a network A666 which has a direct connection to A. And then it advertises this to ASX, saying, I have a direct link to A, but not to entire A, just to /24 in A. You see this, A announces /16 and this announces /24. So this means that all the traffic, A will never announce /24 because A only makes announcements for /16. So this means, it's not like it will never make, it may make, but in this case it doesn't make announcements for /24, so ASX sees announcement for /24 only from 666. So then it will decide that all the traffic that it sends to /24 for A, it will send to here. And all the traffic that it sends to 1200/16, it will send to here. So whenever there is a more specific traffic destined to a more specific address, it will be redirected to 666. And then S666 can tap on it, monitor it, and send back to A. No one notices anything. So this is an insecure deployment. You see, you have an RPKI, you have the signatures, we just saw how to make it secure, but this very small operational thing, which is used in many networks, makes it insecure. So why does the attack work? I just told you, AS666 claims it's a neighbor of ASA. It cannot say it is an ASA himself because there is an ROA. Yeah, so if it says it owns this prefix, this will be discarded by ASX because it will check that the ROA is different. Therefore, what an attacker does, it says it is on the path to A. And this is a correct, legitimate announcement. So RPKI doesn't prevent this situation because it didn't consider or didn't account for it. And in this case, long as prefix match rule will always win. The attacker will always get the traffic for anything within the /24 block. Now, it would have been secure if max length was equivalent to prefix. Yeah, look, here is an example quickly, that if they set the max length to 16, and the attacker makes the same announcement as before, this will not work. Attacker cannot announce a smaller prefix, it cannot announce /24 because this doesn't allow to announce /24. It says that any prefix within this network, the smallest prefix can be /16. In this case, before that, it could be 24, so that's why the attacker could do it. In this case, it is /16, and hence this is the highest that the attacker can do. In this case, it doesn't get the traffic, because why? In ASX, we'll typically prefer the shorter route. So kind of RPKI manages to counter this attack if the RPKI is used correctly how it was meant to be used. It was meant to be used in a way which didn't consider the operational practices which are used. And of course the networks didn't stop using those operational practices. How common are those such deployments? Almost 30% of all prefixes in ROAs have this problem, are vulnerable. 89% of prefixes that use max lengths are vulnerable. So many prefixes, many networks use these practices. It's not like a practice that no one heard of. It's a common practice. It just has significant impact on security of BGP. Now probably you will ask yourself, okay, it's a large number. Actually not, because only 6%, a little bit more than 6% of the prefixes in the internet have ROAs. So only a little bit more than 6% of the prefixes use crypto, use RPKI. And 30% of those 6 prefixes, of those 6% are vulnerable. That's a high number, yeah? Because imagine if the entire internet was using it. It would have been not secure and everyone would have been using crypto. So it's good to look at mechanisms in the beginning. It's not really a beginning, I must say. It has been deployed for a long time. But nevertheless, it's in the early stages of deployment and it can still be adjusted without too much of an effort. So these problems, they manifest even in large providers. It's not some provider that you never heard of. Network operators, yeah, level 3 for instance in the United States, you have Orange in France, Twitter, eBay, different type of organizations, operating large networks. They have a team of network operators, they have a team of experts who know how to do their thing, how to operate networks, and you see even they make mistakes. Good. Mitigations, what you could do. There are mitigations, they're not extremely efficient. So first there is BGP-SEC, which I'm not touching in this talk. BGP-SEC is about securing the link, not just the prefixes, because I'm talking about securing the prefixes. You can also secure the link. It would prevent these attacks because it would prevent attacker from announcing links which do not exist. Or creating ROAs for every possible subprefix in your network. This would be a lot. A lot for routers to process, a lot of certificates to store, and so on. So here's a real example of this loose ROA, how we call them. Those are loose ROAs. A loose ROA in Swisscom. Swisscom received its IP address block from RIPE, European Regional Registry, and it created an ROA. This ROA, the prefix box of Swisscom is 8162/15. Max length is 24. So, of course it's vulnerable, but notice Swisscom has organizations to which it sold or sub-allocated its address block. And it has a lot of organizations. Here are some examples. Some examples are Swisscom and some Swisscom other. So they're owned by Swisscom, but they're operated by other networks. And the attacker can actually, with SOAR attacks against networks with loose ROAs, can easily hijack traffic despite the fact that it's protected with RPKI by adding itself simply to the path. You can send a BGP advertisement with AS path of attacker network 666, and then you add the network of Swisscom 3303 and the IP address blocks, and then everything will be sent through the attacker. It's like similar to the first attack that I showed you that was sent to a different continent. You don't detect those attacks. So this is an example of a real network which has this problem, but this is much more prevalent than one network. Let's look at organizational dependencies. We'll look at operational dependency. which, because of the way networks are operated and the practices which existed forever, they just continue to exist, and the new cryptographic defense doesn't change this. So what about organizational dependency? Organizational dependency are dependency on different networks, on their parents, and so on. So for instance, let's look at downward dependency. There is also an upward dependency. I will skip it. If you are interested in more details about this, we can talk afterwards. Downward dependency. In this case, you have a provider which allocates its address block, like let's say it has a /10 and it wants to allocate address blocks or sell them to their customers. So it allocates it to the customers, and you have an ROA here with max length, with /8, it's class 8, and you have a max length of 8, and some provider, it created an ROA, received its network block from its regional and certificate from its network block and certificate from regional internet registry. And then this provider creates this many customers. Some of those networks have more than 500 customers. Yeah, it's not like 3 customers. This is because I could not draw 500. I didn't have large enough margins. And those customers have /16. Now, if it creates an ROA and uses it to secure its prefix, it's good. It's a secure practice. It's really a good thing to do. But all these customers, the announcements of all these customers will be immediately invalidated if they do not deploy RPKI. Because when they send their announcement, it will look like an attacker's announcement or malicious prefix hijacking announcement where they try to hijack a sub-prefix. Yeah, if the parent created an ROA and signed its prefix with RPKI, but the children did not, then they cannot have, networks who will filter their announcements will be disconnected from those networks, from those children. And this also happens often. So there is no coordination between parent and children. Here is an example of Orange, which has this IP address block, and it created an ROA for this network. But the children, here is some example for the children, have /24. So their announcements are filtered. Networks which check certificates will check the ROA announcements of Orange, France Telecom, and will see that the ROA has max length, which does not allow sending /24. So all these networks will be blocked. Actually, some networks really block those announcements. What happens in this case? In this case, the traffic from those networks is rerouted through other destinations. This is not noticed, such things. It's not always a hijack, they're just rerouted. But the rerouting doesn't necessarily mean that everything is okay, because think about you're rerouted through a country which you do not trust, country which applies censorship. There was an example with, a couple of years ago with Dutch operators traffic traversed China, and because of the censorship which is applied to sites there, they had incorrect mappings in the DNS. Because the DNS of this provider, Dutch provider, was used by many other DNSs in Europe, which were in turn used by other DNSs servers in the United States. Actually, almost all of the internet was poisoned with incorrect announcements, with incorrect mappings, and people from the United States or Europe were redirected to incorrect sites just because of that, because of just one provider. So the impact of just one provider can be extremely significant. Those networks, when they are filtered, they will take a different route. This route may be less good, more expensive in BGP terms, financial terms, more latency in countries which you do not trust, but this is nowadays not detected because not all networks apply crypto, apply filtering. If all the networks did, they would immediately notice the problem because they would see that they cannot communicate to many destinations. So this is another problem, downward dependency. So we just saw two issues. One is operational problems, one is organizational limitations, because of the way simply internet works. Address space allocation is done. This was done years ago. Often the networks don't even know from whom they bought or purchased the IP addresses. It's very difficult to find really a place which collects all the, or has all the information about all the owners of different IP address blocks. So this is another thing. Who is your parent and how much you depend on your parent and what coordination it requires between the child and the parent. It's not like a network can just decide, okay, I do RPKI and I deploy it and invest in it. I invest in infrastructure, I invest in hardware, software, train my personnel. This is not enough. Let's look at another thing, human error. Another significant factor in all this crypto deployment in the internet is human factor. A lot of the errors happen because humans deploy crypto. And you know, even for you, you're experts in crypto. The fact that you understand crypto and you are experts in crypto doesn't mean you can foresee everything, how this crypto will be used and where it will be used. Right? You may create a new cryptographic library, making certain assumptions, but when it's used in a different environment, it will not be secure. And this is one example for an error. But there are even more silly errors, misconfigurations. And there are so many. You can see RPKI monitor for different errors. I didn't summarize them. But here I told you that there are 6%, almost 6.5%, more than 6.5% of announcements of prefixes which are signed with RPKI. Many of those are not correct. So it's a lot. And what's more significant is that those that are incorrect are often large organizations. And you know, one network which is incorrect is not the same as another network is incorrect. If you have a tier 1 provider which serves many customers, if it has incorrect deployment, it affects all its customers. So the question is also who is doing this incorrect? And I'll show you, of course, at the end. So we did a survey, in addition to some of the studies that I showed you, we did a survey of network operators, and being disconnected from legitimate destinations due to human errors is a significant consideration in applying crypto, in using crypto. People know, network operators know they make mistakes, they know that other network operators make mistakes, they don't trust those mistakes, and they know routing is based on financial motivations. If they do filtering, they lose money simply, they lose traffic. They're paid for relaying traffic. If they lose money, they don't deploy this crypto. So how many organizations have this problem? Many, many. Here are a few examples. Here you have the IP prefix of the network, here you have our organization, autonomous system number, and there are different problems. Here I selected a few. Deutsche Telekom is the only one that created ROA securely. All the others are not, for different reasons. So you see this problem is really prevalent. It's not like one network or one ISP you never heard of. It's all over the internet. Here is a brief drift to tell you what you can do. If you like, you can use this tool which we developed. It's called roaalert.org. You can open it in your browser on your network, or you can provide a specific network block, and it will show you if your network is protected with RPKI. If not, what are the problems, if you have dependencies, if you have misconfigured ROA. Of course, when we find problems, we'll also develop tools to help solve them. And now we discussed so far it was only about certificates. You see, all these problems was about certificates. We generate certificates, put them in public repositories, use corresponding private keys to make signatures when sending the announcements. Trivial thing. I studied this in the crypto course in BSc. This is really simple. But when you think about using this in practice, there is so much more than you could anticipate or think about. So when you design a system and you think, okay, now it will be widely deployed, this probably will not happen, because even signatures face such significant challenges which were not foreseen. What does it mean? I'll discuss at the end, but after talking about certificates and signatures, we need to talk about the other aspect and the validation. Yeah, because it's not enough to do certificates and signatures. If no one validates them, it doesn't do any good. You just do a lot of overhead, create those things, put them in public repository, maintain them, and no one uses them. Good, so let's see who uses them and what does it mean to use those certificates at all. Here's a simplified presentation of a network, autonomous system. And this presentation only uses the aspects that are relevant to routing. So you have the RPKI cache. This cache is supposed to retrieve certificates from public repositories. And then you have routers, the BGP routers, which connect the network to the rest of the internet. And you have this public RPKI points. Now this is one of those 5 that I told you, this regional internet registry. Like those are from Europe, they have RIPE, US, and so on. You connect to this repository, you configure your RPKI to connect to the repository, you download the certificates, ROAs and RCs. Really simple, there's no magic behind it. And you verify the certificates and RCs, that the signature is correct, and etc. You check the max lengths, and then you update. If everything is correct, certificate is correct, what you do is you update the routing tables in your BGP routers. And you say, okay, for Deutsche Telekom, for the prefix 9100/10, that belongs to Deutsche Telekom with the yes number 3320 and max length set to 10, this is the rule that you should do. And of course, the routers use that when they see announcements in mail and to make routing decisions, where to send the packet and if to update the rules. So this is trivial. This is really not like there is crypto, which deployment requires really changing a lot, adding a lot, changing a lot. This is not a lot. I think you agree with that. Even worse, not just that it's not a lot, it's already supported in routers. There is support in routers, major router vendors, they support route origin validation. Route origin validation is verification of the signatures and certificates. They can validate whether the announcement is correct. So actually, you have support for this. This kind of sounds like, that's it. We did this, we finished this RPKI thing. So is ROV actually, route origin validation, is actually enforced? Good, I would not be asking this question if it was. It's not. And we measured. Now this is a little bit more challenging than looking at ROAs, because ROAs is just certificates in public repositories. You can just take them and look at them and analyze them, compare to BGP announcements, and see which are correct and which are not. And ROV is challenging, because how do you see what logic the network applies on a traffic when it sees announcements? So what we did is we monitor BGP paths using route view sensors. Route views is a project, it's just routers which are distributed all over the globe. You can see announcements there, BGP announcements. You can see which announcements traverse these networks. And this is what we do. We have a number of origins which make announcements, BGP announcements. And these announcements are incorrect. They contradict ROAs in different ways. Okay, so they should be dropped by networks which do route origin validation. And then we have route view. RV is route view sensor. RV is short for route views. It's just a monitor, and it sees those announcements here. Okay, so those announcements propagate and arrive to the routers. And the route view, and on the router view sensors, we see which announcements actually arrive. So what we do, in fact, you would say, we look for networks which do not do ROV. And networks, all these networks in the middle, we want to see how many of them do not do ROV. And when we receive an announcement or a route view sensor, and we know that the BGP path from here to there is this, then we assume that at least A and C do not do ROV. And when we receive an announcement here and we see that the path is D, E, F, we assume that at least those three do not do ROV. Yeah, so this is in question, maybe it does, maybe not. It requires more complex study, which I will not describe here. But this simple study allows you to check which networks actually on the path between you and the destination, between this origin and the destination do ROV. And we did it for all the networks in the internet. And what we found is that 97% of the networks do not validate certificates. So yeah, you can do certificates, you can put ROAs, but they're of no use to you because no one does ROV. No one validates whether the signatures in the announcements are correct. 0.5% maybe do validation, and only 2 networks. Yes, you hear well, only 2 networks do route origin validation. This is crazy. I mean, this RPKI has been around for some time. But the worst thing is that none of the 100 top ISPs, internet service providers, do RPKI, do validation. So what does it mean? What it means for security, I will tell you in a second. I'll just mention that we also did a survey in addition to this measurement. A survey of network operators. And our survey, actually, all the surveys, we did in parallel the internet study and the surveys. And they actually correlate. Indeed, most networks do not apply. They don't apply ROV, they don't validate incorrect announcements. Why? For different reasons. And so there are 2 questions. So, okay, so what is the implication of this partial adoption and what does it mean? And what should we do? So first, impact of partial adoption is twofold, of RPKI. And this applies to other systems as well that I started with. So first, collateral benefit. One thing that no one thought of. Everyone thinks for crypto seek benefit to kick in, everyone else has to deploy it. Everyone in the internet. This is not precise. It's enough that some systems deploy autonomous systems. And which ones? Here's an example. If AS2 deploys crypto, it automatically protects AS3. AS3 doesn't even need to deploy crypto. This is one significant lesson, because when an attacker sends an announcement, if it wants to hijack origin AS1, and AS1 has an ROA for its prefix with max length 16, when an attacker sends to AS2 this announcement for prefix within /16 of the AS1, the AS2 will filter it because it does validation. So back prefix will never reach AS3. Okay, and then when AS1 really announces, its announcement is sent, because this is a correct announcement, AS2 can validate it against the ROA. So AS3 will only see correct announcements. In fact, it never even has to worry about deployment of RPKI because the ISP behind it does it. But on the other hand, there is the collateral damage of ISPs which do not deploy this. And in a second, you will see that this gives us who are the ISPs that should deploy RPKI. So here's the collateral damage. If IS3 deploys RPKI but AS2 doesn't deploy, the same situation, and you have an announcement from real AS1, and you have an announcement from the attacker Devil 666, which is on the path of AS2. AS2 doesn't do validation, so it forwards the announcement. But AS3 knows that the announcement is incorrect because the prefix doesn't belong to 666, so it will drop it. It doesn't see any alternative route to AS1, so it will be disconnected from AS1. This is one problem. You can say, well, disconnected not so bad because they at least don't hijack my traffic. It's worse. They can also hijack your traffic. Here's an example where you have the same thing, AS1, and the same ROA. AS1 sends an announcement to AS3. Here's a correct announcement. And an attacker sends an announcement to AS3. Notice those 2 announcements are relayed by AS2. Why? Because this is for a subprefix, for /24. It's not the same announcement. Okay, so they are relayed to AS3. What will AS3 do? It deploys RPKI, so it does filtering according to RPKI. It will not send to the attacker. It will only use the route that is architected by AS1. But what is the problem? AS2 selects a different path. It will send to 666. So although AS3 decided I will route to this, AS2 decides that it will forward the traffic to this. So the hijacking doesn't happen on the control plane, not on the BGP level, but it happens on the data plane. Yeah, you do filtering here, your data you decide that your routing tables to send to here will forward through 2, but 2's routing tables send directly to the attacker. So what we see here is it makes a difference which ISPs deploy RPKI. And currently the deployment of crypto is sporadic. Yeah? You try to start, actually there is even an effort to start with the smallest ones. Because if they deploy, many of them will deploy, then maybe the big ones will deploy. But then when the smallest one deploys, it's such a mess and so much effort and overhead, the big ones just get cold feet and they don't want to deploy it anymore. But you don't even need to start with that. You need to have a plan. Deployment of crypto requires, in real world, it requires a plan. You need to have a plan where to start the deployment. Who has to deploy? In this case, we showed that even if only top ISPs deploy, this would suffice. Only top 100 ISPs. So the implications, a significant crypto is almost not used. I'll skip it. Can we secure the internet? Yes, we can. How can we secure the internet? Here are a few recommendations. To secure the internet, avoid deployment obstacles. Now when people work on schemes for deployment in the internet, we do not have understanding of the landscape. We have to understand the landscape first, understand the challenges, operational challenges, organizational challenges, other systems which may ruin your assumptions. Understanding the landscape is extremely important. This is the one prerequisite. Increase motivation. You have to design defenses which have incentives, otherwise no one will deploy your defenses. You have to provide incentives. What are incentives in case of BGP, for instance? In case of BGP, this is simple. You know, BGP is financially oriented. Networks make financial agreements. You pay for being connected for upstream connectivity. So an incentive has to be attracting more traffic. You have to do something which would allow you to attract more traffic in case of BGP. But this applies to other systems as well. You have to have incentives that they would want to do it. Eliminate human factor. How do you eliminate the human? I don't suggest to shoot the humans. What I suggest is automate the defenses. Automate defenses, automate deployment, operation, configuration. If you automate this, there will be no human error. This will reduce and remove a lot of failures and misconfigurations and vulnerabilities. And finally, cryptography at large. Nowadays, when crypto is deployed, you try to somehow sporadically deploy it on different networks, on different levels. It should not be so. You have to have a plan. What would provide most value and most benefit? You don't have to secure all the networks in the internet for benefit. It just suffices to secure a fraction of the networks. And as we saw with routing, this is even more true because, and it's not just with routing, because if you just focus on specific ISPs, the others will already get the benefit. They don't need to deploy it. And this will conclude my talk. Thank you, and further questions.
Any questions?
Surely more economic incentives to be deployed. If I'm a router and I'm sending the stuff to the wrong place, I'm not actually fulfilling my contract. I should be fined, because therefore I should be getting money. Yeah? So if you say that part of this is an economic incentive, surely you should make the economic incentive that if you do the wrong thing because you haven't got the right things in place, you get screwed.
Yeah, but maybe if you route the traffic of an attacker, you benefit more by routing the traffic from an attacker than from routing traffic from a peer. If you prefer to receive the traffic coming from an attacker than from a peer you gain nothing. From an attacker will pay you for traffic, no problem. It wants the traffic. I mean, you see these financial incentives, actually attackers take advantage of them. They don't work in real life.
Because the ones where, the last one where you got the one in the previous picture where you had the guy, and then he made the wrong decision by sending it to the attacker, whereas this guy said you should send it to the good guy.
So there are a number of different constraints. One, for instance, financial motivation is the first constraint in BGP, and you first always look at the financial level. Second level is if you have the most specific announcement. A lot of BGP hijacks, I would not be wrong if I say the vast majority, they use more specific prefix because it's stealthy, and you deterministically hijack traffic to the sub-prefix. So you have to change the way BGP works to change this, because this is how BGP works. And financial incentives, I mean, you should do mechanisms where during traffic hijacks, that your crypto mechanism would ensure that you get more traffic. And this is possible. If you want, we can take it offline. I'm working on something like this. And it is possible to do this, not just in case of BGP. It's also, there are different incentives for different mechanisms, but this is what is lacking. And you are the crypto experts. This is like kind of your, people expect you to do that. Who else will do this? You need to secure the internet infrastructure. We need crypto which can be used and adjusted for the constraints that we have.
Let's thank Haya again. Thank you very much.